In 2014, the British government discovered that a small group of wild beavers had been secretly breeding on a river in Devon. No one knew where they came from. The government's first instinct was to remove them. Instead, a wildlife charity convinced them to let the beavers stay for a 5-year experiment. 8 animals were released back onto the river. What those beavers did to the water, the wildlife, and the landscape around them over the next 5 years stunned the scientists who were watching and changed conservation policy in England permanently. But to understand why 8 beavers mattered so much, you have to understand what England had lost. The Eurasian beaver was once one of the most common mammals in Britain. It lived in every major river system, from the Scottish Highlands to the wetlands of southern England. Beavers shaped the British landscape for thousands of years after the last ice age, felling trees, building dams, and creating the ponds, marshes, and wet meadows that countless other species depended on. Willows, alders, and aspens evolved to regenerate when cut because beavers had been coppicing them for millennia. Then humans hunted them to extinction. Beavers were killed for their dense, waterproof fur, their meat, and a glandular secretion called castoreum, which was used in perfumes and medicines. By the 1200s, they were gone from Wales. By the 1300s, gone from England. The last record of a beaver in Britain comes from Scotland in the 1500s. For 400 years, not a single beaver swam in a British river, and without them, the rivers changed. Streams that had once been slowed and filtered by beaver dams ran fast and straight. Wetlands dried out. Floodwater that had once been absorbed by beaver-made ponds now rushed downstream into towns and villages. Pollutants from farms, including nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, and slurry, flowed unchecked into waterways. Almost every natural pond in lowland England had originally been created by beavers. Without them, those ponds vanished, and with them went the habitat for frogs, newts, dragonflies, and dozens of wetland bird species. Today, only 14% of English rivers meet good ecological health standards. The country's waterways are among the most degraded in Europe. The River Otter in East Devon was no exception. It flows 32 kilometers from its source at Otterhead through rolling farmland and small villages to the English Channel at Budleigh, Salterton. Like most English rivers, it had been drained, straightened, and engineered for centuries to move water off the land as fast as possible. Its tributaries ran quick and shallow, its wetlands were gone, its water quality was poor. Then, around 2008, something appeared in the river that no one expected. Local residents began reporting sightings of large animals in the River Otter at dusk. Flat tails, broad heads, gnawed trees along the banks. At first, no one could confirm what they were seeing, but by 2013, trail camera footage settled the question. A female beaver had given birth to kits on the River Otter. Wild beavers were breeding in an English river for the first time in over 4 centuries. No one knows how they got there. The leading theory is that someone released captive beavers into the river illegally, possibly years earlier. However they arrived, the government's initial response was clear: remove them. The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs planned to capture the beavers and take them into captivity. Devon Wildlife Trust opposed the removal. The charity argued that the beavers represented an unprecedented opportunity. Rather than removing them, why not study them? Why not turn an accident into a proper scientific trial, the first wild beaver reintroduction project in England? After negotiations with Natural England and the government, Devon Wildlife Trust received a license to run a 5-year monitoring program. The beavers were captured, tested for disease, microchipped, and released back into the River Otter in February of 2015. 2 family groups, 8 beavers in total. The River Otter beaver trial had begun. The trial was led by Devon Wildlife Trust in partnership with the University of Exeter, Clinton Devon Estates, and the Derek Gow Consultancy. Professor Richard Brazier of the University of Exeter oversaw the scientific monitoring. His team installed equipment along the river and its tributaries, weirs, sensors, and water quality monitors to measure everything the beavers changed. They had data from before the beavers arrived, which gave them a clean baseline for comparison. What the beavers did next was not subtle. They built dams. Not on the main stem of the River Otter, because it was too deep and wide for that, but on the smaller tributaries and streams feeding into it, the beavers went to work. On one section of stream along the river tail, a single family of beavers constructed 13 dams along a 180-meter stretch. The dams created a chain of ponds and pools that held approximately 1 million liters of water that had not been stored there before. Before the beavers, water rushed through that stretch of stream in under 15 minutes. After the dams were built, the same volume of water took over an hour to pass through. The beavers had, without any engineering degree or government contract, turned a fast, shallow ditch into a functioning wetland. The engineering itself is remarkable. Beavers are Europe's largest rodent, weighing up to 30 kilograms. Their front teeth never stop growing, which is why they must gnaw constantly. They work almost entirely at night, felling trees with their teeth, dragging branches into the water, and packing the gaps with mud, stones, and vegetation. A beaver can fell a small willow in under 10 minutes. The trees they cut do not die. Willows and alders regenerate from the stump, producing dense new growth that provides both food and building material for years to come. The beavers are not destroying the riverbank, they are coppicing it. It is the same technique that British woodland managers have used for centuries, borrowed from the animal that invented it. The flood protection was the first result that made headlines. Upstream of the village of East Budleigh, which had long suffered from flooding, a beaver family built 6 dams across a tributary. The University of Exeter's monitoring equipment recorded measurable and significant reductions in peak flood flows through the village during heavy rain events. Across multiple beaver dam sites in the catchment, research showed that beaver dams reduced average flood peaks by up to 60%, even during the largest storms monitored. The water was not just slower, it was cleaner. Researchers found that beaver dams and ponds acted as natural filtration systems. Sediment, nitrogen, phosphorus, manure, slurry, and agricultural fertilizers that would normally wash straight downstream were trapped and broken down in the still water behind the dams. At the site where beavers had built 13 dams, scientists concluded that the beavers were playing a significant role in filtering these pollutants from the water. The River Otter was getting cleaner because of rodents. The benefits did not only appear during floods. During dry periods, the water stored behind beaver dams continued to seep downstream slowly, maintaining elevated base flow in the stream even when rain had not fallen for weeks. In a country increasingly prone to both winter flooding and summer drought, the beavers were providing a buffer against both extremes. The wetlands they created also sequestered carbon in waterlogged soils, locking away greenhouse gases that would otherwise enter the atmosphere. A single beaver territory was functioning as a miniature climate adaptation system. And the wetlands the beavers created did not just hold water and filter it, they held life. The biodiversity results were the most dramatic finding of the entire trial. In the pools created by beaver dams, fish abundance was 37% higher than in comparable stretches of the river where there were no dams. Minnow and lamprey populations increased. The gravels exposed below washed-out dams created ideal spawning habitat for juvenile trout. Researchers observed trout leaping over beaver dams during high river flows. The dams were not blocking fish movement. Amphibians exploded. At the site where beavers had built 13 dams along that 180-meter stretch of stream, counts of common frog spawn went from 10 clumps in 2011 to 681 clumps in 2017. That is not a misprint. 10 to 681. In 6 years, on a single stretch of stream, because a family of beavers built some ponds. New wetland habitat appeared where there had been none. Water voles, one of Britain's most endangered mammals, benefited from the new marshy habitat. Riverine birds including dippers, kingfishers, and teal moved in. Wildfowl that had not been seen on those stretches of river arrived and began breeding. Otters, actual otters on the River Otter, thrived because the increased fish populations gave them more food in clearer water. Dragonflies colonized the new ponds. Insect diversity along the beaver-modified stretches increased. The Science and Evidence Report, overseen by Professor Brazier's team at the University of Exeter, concluded that the effect of beaver engineering and feeding had delivered significant ecological benefits, with new areas of wetland habitat created and managed, with documented benefits for amphibians, wildfowl, and water voles. Mark Elliott, who led the River Otter Beaver trial for Devon Wildlife Trust, put it simply. He said, "We have all been surprised by these amazing animals' ability to thrive, once again, in our wetland ecosystems. It also shows their unrivaled capacity to breathe new life into our rivers and wetlands, very few of which are in good health." The beavers also brought money. Guided beaver watching tours along the River Otter became one of Devon's most popular wildlife experiences. Visitors came from across the country to sit by the riverbank at dusk and watch the animals emerge from their lodges. Local businesses benefited. The trial's economic analysis concluded that the quantifiable benefits of the beavers on the River Otter, including ecotourism revenue and ecosystem services like flood alleviation and water purification, outweighed the costs of managing any negative impacts on farmland. By the time the 5-year trial ended in February of 2020, the original 2 family groups of 8 beavers had grown to an estimated 15 family groups spread throughout the River Otter catchment. They had expanded along tributaries, built dozens of dams, created new wetlands, and established themselves as a permanent part of the landscape, all without any further human assistance. The trial's costs were manageable: occasional flooding of small areas of farmland, a few specimen trees gnawed, and a dam blocking a culvert. Devon Wildlife Trust worked directly with 42 landowners across the catchment to address problems as they arose. The overall conclusion was unambiguous. The benefits of beavers on the River Otter outweighed the costs. In August of 2020, the government announced its decision. The beavers could stay. They were granted the permanent right to live, breed, and spread naturally into other river catchments from the River Otter. It was the first legally sanctioned reintroduction of an extinct native mammal to England. Tony Juniper, the chair of Natural England, called it a brilliant success. Environment Minister Rebecca Powell said the trial had proven that beavers improve biodiversity and water quality, mitigate flooding, and make the local landscape more resilient to climate change. The River Otter trial did not just save a handful of beavers in Devon, it changed national policy. On February 28, 2025, the British government announced that beavers could now be released into the wild in England for the first time in centuries. No fences, no enclosures, wild release with a license. 5 days later, the National Trust released the first 4 wild beavers at Littlesea Lake in Purbeck, Dorset. It was the first official wild beaver release in England since the 16th century. By 2026, Natural England had received 39 expressions of interest for wild beaver releases across England, including proposals for some of the country's largest river systems. An estimated 500 beavers already live wild in England from a mix of licensed enclosures, trial populations, and unofficial releases. That number is growing fast. The National Trust has now released beavers on its Holnacote estate in Somerset as part of a plan to restore a vast stretch of countryside and moorland. An estimated 100 additional beavers are being reintroduced to British waterways this year alone. Conservation organizations across the country are actively restoring beavers to rivers from Cornwall to London, including 2 beavers named Hazel and Chompy, released into Hampshire in 2023, the first beavers in that county in 400 years. All of it traces back to the River Otter. Today, the beavers of the River Otter are estimated to live in at least 20 family territories along the river and its tributaries. The University of Exeter's latest research found that 4 wild beaver territories in Devon collectively store more than 24 million litres of water. Farmers along the catchment are now being paid through government environmental land management schemes to make space for beavers on parts of their fields. Sam Bryant Evans, head of agriculture at Clinton Devon Estates, described the resulting wetland as a fantastic environment. He said, "The new wetland is home to a huge range of insects and birds that would never have been here before. Land that was once cattle grazing is now being colonized by otters, kingfishers, and species that had not been seen in those fields in living memory. 400 years ago, England killed its last beaver. It drained the wetlands, straightened the rivers, and spent centuries trying to move water off the land as fast as possible. Then it spent billions trying to fix the flooding, the pollution, and the biodiversity collapse that followed. 8 beavers on a small river in Devon did more in 5 years than decades of engineering had managed. They slowed the floods, they cleaned the water, they brought the wildlife back. And they did it for free, working at night, building with sticks and mud, doing nothing more than what beavers have always done. It turns out that when you give a river back its beavers, the river remembers how to heal itself."